Good morning. Welcome to Communicating Confidently and Effectively at Work. My name is Anna Manzano, and I'm the Digital Media and Event Strategist here at the California Employers Association. Before we get into today's content, I have just a couple details to cover with you. As you see, your audio is going to be muted throughout today's presentation, but there's going to be lots of opportunities and invitations to engage during today's session. If you have any questions pertaining to the presentation content, you can enter those right into the chat box. I will be here the whole time helping Keisha monitor the chat, making sure that you guys have everything you need. So just enter into the chat box and we'll get you taken care of. Handouts for this training were sent out yesterday in the reminder email. However, I'm also going to pop them into the chat box shortly. So when you see a little file name pop up, if you still need to access that file, you can just click on it and it'll download locally to your drive. Always message me if you need any help with that. Last but not least, we do have a survey. It's 90 seconds, 5 questions. But the feedback that you share with us in those 5 questions, we really take to heart here at CEA. We just make sure that we are meeting your expectations with our entire suite of resources, specifically trainings like this. So if you could take the 90 seconds at the end of this training, we would love to hear your feedback. And now I have the great privilege of introducing our trainer today. So we have Keisha Hansen, who is our Learning and Development Director. And I know we have so much good stuff to cover. So Keisha, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Anna. Welcome, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning. We so appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to be here with us. And again, as Anna said, this is interactive, even though we cannot hear you or see you. Please do participate in the chat. We have a couple of polls. We want to be able to interact with each other. And I always say I learn as much, if not more, from attendees that I work with. So happy to have you all here today for members and any non-members. And if any non-members have joined us for the first time, very briefly, and aren't that familiar with California Employers Association, we are a Human Resource Association. We've been in business for over 80 years. I think we're bordering on 85. And our philosophy and goal is really to provide the employers and members that we work with peace of mind through our human resource compliance solutions, through trainings and webinars such as this. We also can provide on-site trainings, virtual private trainings as well. We do recruiting services, executive coaching, so quite a lot of things. So if any of that piques your interest, you can feel free to give us a call at the 1-800 number, and we'd be happy to help you. I also want to give our lawyers peace of mind by letting you know that today should not be relied upon as legal advice, and I am not a lawyer. Although we're not really delving into a lot of compliance issues today, just need to let you know that. But if you are looking for an attorney about any issues, again, you can call that 800 number, and we do partner with several lawyers throughout the state. Anyone else having allergies? Anna and I just discussed that and got a little bit of a tickle in my throat, so forgive me. So something brought you here today, and when you think about it, as it relates to communication, really everything we do is communicating, whether it's in our personal lives, our professional lives. I can't think of a day that goes by where I'm not emailing, texting, talking to someone in person or over the phone. So it's really important, again, both in our personal and professional lives, to communicate confidently and effectively. So we're going to touch on a few things that we've learned from working with our members. Whew. All right, those tickles are getting strong. Might have to engage even more with you all. So some of the things we're going to talk about, we've learned from our members. Talk about active listening, using some clear and concise messaging. And one of the things that comes up when we are training specific employers or managers is how to address conflict. So in the limited time that we have today, those are the things we're going to attempt to cover. And here is a quote by Warren Buffett, which he gave in an article in a magazine, and he was talking about things to become more of a doer rather than a dreamer. And I was really talking about honing your communication skills can really increase your value professionally more than 50%. And he was speaking to verbal communication as well as written communication, because as we said, everything we do is communication. We're communicating with our teams, with our vendors, with our customers. And so we really want to be able to establish relationships by having those confident and effective communication skills. So this was a study that was done a few years ago to kind of determine what is the cause of some of the mistakes that we make in the workplace. And the study results showed that poor communication valued at 70% of the mistakes in the workplace. Is that a surprise to anybody? Does that come as a shock? Probably not. You've probably been in situations where the communication got lost in translation, and then it resulted in someone doing something that was a mistake or a misunderstanding. And that can affect many areas of the organization and the workplace. So again, another reason why it's so important when we are communicating effectively that we are being clear and concise with our messaging. So here is the part where I ask you to be interactive and just kind of asking you your opinion in terms of what do you think are some of the challenges at your workplace going on today? And if none of these apply, you can also throw anything in the chat. So what are some of the challenges you face with communication at work? And you can answer more than one. So when I say information overload, sometimes we are going back to back from meeting to meeting, to talking to our teams, to talking to customers, to reading emails, and our brains are not computers yet. So sometimes we can get that information overload. We're just inundated with too much information. So if someone tries to communicate at the end of the day, and we've had so much that maybe we have information overload. Or you have different employees, they come with different communication styles. We're all different. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Addressing conflicts at work, it's inevitable. We're going to have to address conflict at work, whether we're a leader, whether we're a manager. And yeah, we're really getting into this. It seems like everybody has experienced a few or all of these. So let's share what these are. So 67% tied, three-way tie with mixed messages, people not listening actively, and different communication styles, which those of you who answered that, you're not alone. These are common answers that we've received from employers and members that we've worked with. Also, you have tied at ineffective meetings, addressing conflicts at work, and information overload. So things that we hopefully can give you some tips and strategies for today. And again, you're not alone. We have heard this from many. In addition, some challenges that you mentioned in the poll are inability to listen. So we'll talk about some strategies on how we can become better listeners and maybe some of the causes of that. Another one that's brought up recently is the use of multiple communication platforms. And when we were in the heat of the pandemic, many companies had to start using different communication platforms that they might not have been using prior. And as a result, maybe didn't establish some processes or some procedures on when are we going to use those platforms? Is everybody going to get trained on these different platforms? And then our reliance on written communication. Unfortunately, email has become our default use of communication. But as all of you have probably experienced, it's not always the most effective way of communicating with each other. And then again, as I mentioned, one of the biggest challenges that our managers have when they come to our trainings is being able to address conflict at work. So as you can see, with all of these challenges, when we think of communication, and many times in the past, it's been referred to as a soft skill, but we really strongly believe it is a critical skill in the workplace because, again, it is how we are sending messages and how we are instructing employees and how we're setting the tone and setting the example. Some additional barriers to communication that we've seen as employers is that we are all different, right? We are not the same. We have different accumulated experiences from our educational backgrounds, the way we grew up, who our parents were, the friends we had, the communities we lived in. All of those things have shaped us and predisposed us to think and act differently. So we all do have different communication styles. We do work differently. And it's really important that we find out, we meet people where they are and find out what are their communication preferences, what are their work styles, so that we can communicate effectively with each individual and each team member that we work with. Another major barrier is not sharing the same meaning in the words we use. And you know, when you go from industry to industry, we all use different acronyms. So someone coming new into the industry, that might be hard for them to acquire all of those acronyms that might be used. Also, just if we grew up differently geographically, we might not share the same meaning in the words we use. And just making sure that we understand what someone means when they are conversing with us. Years ago, I used to work in retail, and I worked for a shopping center, and or more commonly known as a shopping mall. And they did not like that name. They like to refer to themselves as a retail resort. And many of the customers who called us up, and I was in charge of customer service, would say, "Well, where's the resort part of the establishment?" And we didn't have a resort. We didn't have rooms or a pool. It was just really a shopping center. So there was created a lot of confusion. In addition, they referred to our food court as a dining hall. And people would say, "What do you mean by a dining hall?" So it could create confusion, right? So we really want to be specific with the audience when in terms of who we're redirecting the communication to. Are we making sure that the words we are using everyone understands? So I'm going to give you another example. And gosh, I'm here in Southern California. It's a little cloudy today. So I'm suggesting that we all take a trip to Hawaii. Anybody on board? Let me know in the chat, yes or no. Anybody ready for a trip? All right. Anna's ready to go. So all I ask of all of you when we're going on that trip to Hawaii is that you get to the airport on time. So what does that mean to you to be on time at the airport? When are you going to arrive at the airport? And/or is that message clear to you when I say all you have to do is get to the airport on time? Yeah, everybody's ready to go, but what does it mean for you to be on time? So are you going to get to the airport 1 hour early, 2 hours early, an hour and a half? See, that would be cutting it close for me. Yes, 4 hours early, 2 hours early. Yeah, so I mean, you can just imagine when we're communicating, and again, sometimes our communication defaults to email, and you get that email, and then the message goes back and forth, and by the time all the clarification is asked and responded to, everybody has about 20 emails going back and forth, right? So it's really important to really be clear and say, gosh, what information do you all need to know when I say get to the airport on time? Well, first of all, I probably need to be clear in terms of what time and what airport we're going for. So maybe Sacramento Airport, would be a little bit easier to get through than where I would have to go to at LAX. So I'd probably get to LAX 4 hours in advance, just depending on traffic. And I'd say get to the gate, and I could be specific in terms of what airline we're going. So just being really clear and concise and making sure that everybody understands so that we don't get into that spiral of all of these emails going back and forth, which we know many people don't read all of those emails that are going back and forth or don't have time. I love it. Unless Southwest is backed up, you guys have some specifics here. 2.5 if I park in economy, right? So we're going to get that all clarified, and that's really what it means to be an effective communicator, is making sure that your message is being understood by everybody. Of course, there are going to be times when people need clarification, but really looking at the message that you're trying to send and saying, was I really clear? Did everybody understand this message? And this may or may not be surprising, but 81% of today's workers say the primary difference between workers in the workplace is communication styles. And yes, we do have several generations still working today, and many people have commented that it can be challenging because look at the graph. If you look at the graphic, all of the different types of communication that evolved during each generations when they were starting out in the workplace. So if you look at the left, maturists, which are also known as our seniors or traditionalists, they didn't have all the technology that we had today. So they really were relying on memos, formal letters, face-to-face, and then eventually we had the telephone and computer and text messaging and all of the technology that has advanced over those years. We have to keep in mind that the different generations, they didn't determine when they were going to be going into the workforce and what advancements in technology were going to become available. So we have certain preferences, and that's not to say that we don't all need to adjust and adapt to the new technology that's available, but it sometimes explains why someone might be more comfortable with using face-to-face, or why they might be more comfortable using the more modern technology, just because of what was available to them when they were growing up and when they started in the workforce. Also, when we hear all the issues about working with different generations, it's really about meeting people where they are, and also understanding that we all contribute something of value, no matter what generation that we were brought up in. So meeting people where they are, finding out, what are their strengths in terms of communication, what communication preference they prefer, that they feel strongly about, and also recognizing that we all have something that we contribute. So when I was working in that retail environment in customer service, my oldest employee was 78 and my youngest employee was 16. And the 78-year-old was able to mentor the 16-year-old on phone etiquette because the 78-year-old had been a VIP travel agent for Fortune 500 companies. So, I mean, her phone etiquette was amazing. And of course, the 16-year-old was part of the Gen Z, and she hadn't really used the phone. So it was very much a fear of hers. So they were able to mentor each other, and the 16-year-old was able to mentor the 78-year-old on methods of using the gift card computer system. So looking at that as an opportunity to mentor, up, down, regardless of position and title, that we all have something that we can learn from each other. And just really establishing, what do people prefer? How am I going to get a hold of you? What is the best mode of communication can really help. And then some additional barriers that we kind of consider red flags, that maybe the communication isn't being effective and isn't creating that foundation of respect, is maybe when you overhear gossip in the workplace, maybe people using hurtful statements or inappropriate language or humor, when people are invading people's privacy or personal space, if you are in the same building or area, and then disrespectful listening, right? When we really aren't using our active listening skills, maybe we're distracted, we're multitasking, we're interrupting the person. Those are things that are habits that we've created over time. So you really want to be aware of those. or when maybe a work environment becomes kind of the blame game area, fault finding, and doing so in a negative manner can really create that unhealthy tension that can inhibit effective communication. And then criticizing or mocking someone in front of others. And again, I go back to this retail environment where we would have weekly staff meetings where the general manager would intentionally call someone out in front of everybody else. And it was all different departments that were present in those meetings. And she would inherently, every meeting would call someone out. And it just made everybody else feel so bad for that person that we really lost the communication, what was trying to be communicated to us in that meeting, that we would eventually go outside of that meeting and ask everybody else what was going on, what happened, what were we trying to get accomplished in that meeting. So it really was not productive, was not effective, and again, ultimately created an unhealthy work environment. So those are some red flags. If those start popping up and you are in a position of leadership or management, you really want to take stock of that. Really see, gosh, we may need to do some retraining here, or have a meeting about, what are the procedures and protocols for communication within our departments and within our organizations. So we've talked about some of the challenges and some of the barriers. One thing to keep in mind is that we are responsible for, when we are communicating, the main principles. Everything we do is communication. So our body language, how we're writing those emails, our tone, everything that we do can determine the outcome of the communication. So if we begin our communication and we're upset, if we have an aggressive or an assertive tone, then people are really going to be paying attention to that and really not the message that we're trying to convey. The real communication is, what is the message being received, not the message intended. So you really want to pay attention to everything, especially if you're in person, to your body language, to your tone, because when our nonverbal communication is not in alignment with what we're saying, people will pay attention to that, and they can perceive that to be inauthentic. They can perceive that to not be transparent. So we really want to be careful if that does tend to be something that you're concerned about individually, something to keep a lookout for. And then we have now all this wonderful communication, all this advancement in technology, and it was supposed to kind of streamline our communication, and in many ways it can when it's used effectively. But sometimes when we do have less face-to-face communication, we're not seeing people's nonverbal communication cues. We can't pick up on, are they understanding the message? Are they receiving the message clearly? We also have shorter attention spans, so we have to really be clear and concise. Some of us can be long talkers or long email writers, and not everybody is going to take the time to read those long emails. So again, knowing who your audience is and how people like to receive that communication. We have done executive coaching for people before, and when they write emails with their direct supervisor, the direct supervisor is like, I just need the bullet points. I don't need all these long paragraphs. Or when they were sending the message or communicating with the CEO wanted all of those details, again, because it's their organization, their baby. They want to know everything that's going on. So again, knowing who your audience is and how they prefer to be communicated with is really important. Again, when we went into the pandemic mode, sometimes people didn't get trained on the different platforms that evolve, or what was the expectation of how are we going to communicate? When do I expect a response in terms of communication? And then we're all just trying so hard to respond so quickly that of course can result in some misunderstandings, miscommunication, and again, that information overload. Have you ever thought to yourself, gosh, I sent that long email, could have I picked up the phone, could I had a Zoom meeting with that person, or if you're lucky enough to be in person, could I have just gone into the office and had a conversation with that person? So knowing which modes of communication is really important. And this is just a pyramid of when communication is really the most personal and intimate. And of course, at the top, you see face-to-face. That's again when we as humans are looking for those nonverbal cues and clues to help us understand if the person we're communicating with and speaking with is understanding. They're shaking their head, they're nodding, they're saying yes, they're asking questions back to find out more information, or they're not, they're shrugging their shoulders, they're looking confused. And so we know to maybe give some more information. So those are really when you have the most sensitive issues, the most delicate conversations, some conflict to address. You really would ideally want to be face to face, but if you can't be face to face, getting on a virtual meeting, so at least again you can pick up on some of those nonverbal cues and clues. Then obviously phone and teleconferencing, and collaboration tools, whatever you use, Slack, Teams. I know a lot of companies do identify different projects that people may be working on to use that tool, and then email, right? And I think that's just sometimes when we're working in hybrid or remote, knowing what are the expectations of getting back to that person, right? Some of the employers that would call us would say, gosh, I have this person and they're working remotely, but they don't respond to my emails within the time that I expect them to. So I'm not even sure that they're working. So setting and establishing those protocols is really important so that people know what the expectations are. So in terms of communication, what are you using the most? Just another poll to get you interactive. Let me see, I can pull it up. And again, this is multiple. Obviously, we might use these all interchangeably, but are there some defaults? And maybe are there some communication methods that maybe you're using too much and the message isn't clear that you could pick up the phone? So this is just kind of self-awareness too. Gosh, are we using too much email? Could we have some more virtual meetings? Are we having too many virtual meetings? According to research, we're having more meetings than we had even prior to the pandemic. So maybe those could be more concise, or are we inviting the right people to the meeting? And this is no surprise to me. But yes, our default is email. And again, email is easy, it's convenient, but we're not all wordsmiths and we're not all eloquent writers. So we have to be concise and clear when we are using email. And again, making sure that we are getting the message across, and that the person receiving the message is really understanding the intent of that message. So just some things to think about. 50%, that's pretty good face-to-face. Virtual meetings, 75%. Yeah, we'll talk about that as well. So again, when it comes to all those different platforms, again, some companies haven't established or hadn't established some clear communication protocols in terms of utilization of those communication platforms. So that could be number one. Hey, gosh, we didn't really establish when we're using Slack, when we're using Teams, how many virtual meetings we're having, when we're scheduling meetings. Are we all looking at the calendar together? Are we overlapping too close together so people are getting burnt out on all of the meetings? In terms of when I just need to answer a question, and we were working with a manufacturing company that they had a kind of an open space. So when employees had questions, they came right up to their managers all day throughout the day, and the managers were having a hard time getting time to actually do work that they needed to get done. So again, establishing those times when you can come up and ask me questions, designating, you really do want to be open for your employees to ask those questions, but sometimes you do need some designated time, especially if it's going to take your higher cognitive listening skills. When are we expected to answer emails internally? I know at CEA we have external protocols when we get back to members. All of our HR directors know what that time frame is, so it becomes very clear. When are we giving status updates? Is that a face-to-face? How are we communicating with our clients? Or are we asking our clients how do they prefer to be communicated with? And sometimes this can get overlooked when we're going, again, so fast to keep up with the pace of change and the pace of technology. And again, it's your responsibility if you are communicating a message that you send that clear message. And so we're going to take a quick look at email, but just keeping in mind with email that it is a permanent form of communication that can be easily shared. We have seen email make or break careers, really hurt work relationships with people. So you really want to be careful. And then also just keeping in mind that anything sent from your company's computer is the property of your company. So just keeping that in mind as you communicate via that default method of email. So with email, in order for it to be effective, we really want to make that clear subject line. That might be the only thing that the people we're communicating with read. So we want to attract them. We want to say, hey, this is important. So really making that a clear subject line that's going to make that person want to open that email, because a lot of email does get, especially for people who tend to receive more emails than others. Distinguishing who the email is for. Do we have to include everybody in the organization, or can we hone it in to a specific few? And really answering that question for ourselves, what information do we want the reader to have, really? And highlight what action it is that you want to be taken as a result of this email. And of course, always defaulting to professional. And if that is something you're challenged with, maybe someone within your organization, within your team, within your department really is a wordsmith. They really like using professional language, or they've just really gained the skills in that, and asking them if they can read your email before sending, right? Really looking at that a second or third time. Again, if it's really important, you want to make sure you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's, and you can always find someone that will want to help you with that. And then again, considering your audience, you're not going to use industry terminology and jargon if your customer or client doesn't understand it, right? Or if you have a newer employee that might not understand it. When in doubt, always use a professional tone. Again, keeping in mind, what are their objectives and needs? How can I communicate that in this email? Are they likely to be sharing this communication with their colleagues and peers? Is this my first email? So again, to this person, so I'm going to default to being very professional. And then how we can improve is just, again, writing with clarity, keeping your email clear, concise, very tight and effective, trying to answer those questions for yourself. What does this person really need to know from this email? And if not, edit it out. Read it out loud before sending. That way you can pick up on tone. People can really interpret tones through emails, even though we're not talking. And then try not to say anything that you would be horrified to see online in a public forum, because again, email can be easily shared, as we all have probably seen play out in the media. And then establish agreements on forms of frequency of email communication so people know when you expect them to respond. If it's end of day, if it's by the end of day Friday, that really helps people. And you're not just waiting around checking your email to see if someone's going to respond. They know when you're going to expect it. And then just a real quick slide on meetings. Meetings, like I said, we're having more meetings than ever before. These are just some tips that were shared from a book called How the Future Works. And I thought they are very common sense, but sometimes we're not always implementing them. And one of the tips was creating and sending an agenda, if you can, 24 hours prior to live meetings. And what that can do is let the persons know that are attending the meeting what's going to happen in that meeting, what are the topics, so that can keep you on track. Also, it can give people some time to process what is going to be discussed so they can come up with some items to contribute or to think about. We've all been caught off guard in meetings before where we didn't know that was coming up, and maybe we need time to process or we need time to think. So that can really enable the meeting to be more productive by giving people some notice and time to process and think, oh gosh, I want to add this to the meeting, or I want to bring this up. Also, just documenting and sharing notes, because we're not always able to attend all of the meetings. So having some notes shared with us can give us some information. And sometimes things happen in meetings. Some important information is shared that if we weren't in attendance, and we miss out on that, again, that can lead to some miscommunication and misunderstanding. So by having the notes, sharing the notes, we can see them, we can look at them, we can say, oh gosh, that's not correct. I need to clarify this with the team. Also having a meeting code of conduct. I was in an on-site training the other day, and the HR director brought up the occurrence of people having side conversations, and they were in an on-site facility during meetings. And it wasn't intentional. It was just people they're seeing that person for the first time during the day, and they're trying to get this done or worked through. But for the other people that are conversing and attending the meeting, that can be very distracting, and it can share with them that maybe they're not really listening, right? So having a code of conduct, reminding people maybe we're not bringing our cell phones into this meeting, keeping the meeting on track. Again, if you have that agenda, if people bring up some side things that they want to discuss, you can put that in the parking lot. You can talk about it offline. So really, respecting and recognizing people's time by keeping the meeting on track, designating a specific facilitator so you can keep meetings on track. And then companies are now it's trending to have some no meeting days, because we are so involved in meetings that we are finding it hard to get some actual work done, that people are having no meeting Mondays, no meeting Fridays, which can be very effective as well. So that comes to the point where we were talking about some of the challenges being listening. And why do you think, if you can throw it in the chat, why is listening becoming so hard? What has evolved? What has happened that we are having a hard time being really good, active listeners? And I'll give you some. Especially in our society in the United States, it can be our tendency to want to talk because we have so many thousands of thoughts going through our brain throughout the day. Sometimes we just want to get that thought out of our brain so that we can concentrate on other things, so that we can focus more. Sometimes we want to share our knowledge. And if it's a topic that we think we're really knowledgeable about, we want to get it out there as well. But again, if we're interrupting people by that natural desire to talk, or we are overwhelming the conversation, then again, people can have that perception that maybe we don't care about their communication or their opinion. Also, we do have biases and preconceptions, and we judge others. And so we want to be able to keep an open mind and really be open when people share their different opinions and ideas. Our egos get in the way. Maybe we feel really strongly about something and we say, I just know I'm right in this. And so again, that can prevent us from truly being an active listener. And we do that with our friends and family or so. So that's a great way to check your egos if you're always trying to be right with your friends and family. We all also trying to multitask, right? We're trying to do so many things at once. And really, multitasking is a myth. The higher the cognitive level, we really need to be able to focus. So when we're trying to understand the message that others are giving us by their communication, really truly do need to focus, and multitasking really isn't beneficial. Sometimes we shut others off when again, we don't agree with them or we don't think they're right. So that can prevent us from really listening to some new facts about things. And then again, the information overload. Yeah, we don't want to forget, as one of you put in the chat, I don't want to forget what I want to say. And we need to table that, right? So that we can really be in the present mind to really understand what the person is communicating to us. And reasons to listen is really understanding the other person and what their message is, right? That's really, especially if you are in a position of management or leadership, or just getting to know your colleague or peer, understanding where the other person is coming from, their perspective, their point of view, also can help you connect with other people, right? If they know that you're an active listener, people tend to go to you more. If you're someone who has empathy, as one of your strengths, people do tend to come to you, and you tend to be a good listener because you really can put yourself in the other person's shoes, the other person's situation. It also can determine the quality of your influence. The more you listen, the more people want to come to you and share their ideas, their opinions, their issues, their problems. If they don't feel like you're a good listener, they have more hesitancy to come to you. It also transmits respect for the other person. Again, it displays empathy by being that active listener, and it builds trust, right? So listening with the intent to hear and understand, right? We really want to understand what that person is saying and be open-minded and have that present mind. And all of these things are habits that when we become self-aware of them, we can start working on to improve. And we've all been victim or guilty of all these different levels of listening. So we've been in that moment where we pretended to listen, where we've selective listened, where we just were trying to pull out things that we wanted to respond to and react to. We've completely ignored, listened. And those are really when we're focusing on ourselves, right? We're really not creating that open environment for that two-way dialogue. Attentive listening, we're still trying to pick up on how can I respond to this? How can I react to this? And ideally, what we want is an empathetic listener. So that's someone who really is being present, right? Putting all distractions to the side, really being open to what that other person is saying and hearing what their perspective is and what their viewpoint is. And that's what we're trying to achieve. But again, these are all habits that once we are aware of them, we can start improving upon. So some easy tips is, again, when you are in that active listening mode, you're asking questions for clarification, for understanding. You're giving someone your full attention. You're really trying not to interrupt, trying not to get that thought out of your head and really waiting for that person to finish. You're paraphrasing to make sure you understand. You're providing empathy and support depending on the conversation. If it's sensitive, if it's delicate, right? I really want to be there and show my support. And then sometimes we have a struggle with really being okay with silence, really allowing that person some time to process maybe what we've said so that they can form a thoughtful response. And silence is okay. It may seem awkward at times, but silence is okay. And sometimes we have to give people that time. And maybe it means, reconvening to that conversation, maybe stepping away and letting them process what has been said. So also when we are conversing and able to converse face to face, you want to be aware of your nonverbal communication. So what is your tone? How is your posture? What is your eye contact? What are your facial expressions? Again, being engaged with that person, what's showing up for the other person? Because even if we're having a difficult conversation, we want to be able to create that environment where someone feels safe, right? To give their opinion, to give their ideas. So smiling, even though maybe it's not your natural tendency, again, if you're having a difficult conversation with someone or something that, might be some constructive feedback, you want to make sure that you've created that safe space. So smiling can make all the world of difference. And then talking about addressing conflict. So maybe not giving you 30 seconds because we are getting already to the end, but 15 seconds. If you have a pen and paper handy, I want you to write down all the words that you associate with conflict. This is not something you need to think about. It's just brainstorming, free flow. What are the words that come to mind when you think of conflict? And you may start now. So just 15 seconds to quickly jot down some words when you think of conflict. About 5 seconds left. All right, so hopefully you had a few. Now, when you look at that piece of paper or whatever you jotted down, how many of those were positive? And let us know in the chat. Did anybody have any positive discourse? Yes, that could be. What else did you have? Exchange of ideas. Awesome. Great. So usually when we do this exercise, more people tend to have negative words associated with conflict than positive. So sometimes we have to reframe our mindset, right? To think that there is some positives of conflict, so that it is engaging in an exchange of ideas and information, and keeping in mind that because we're all different and we have different experiences, that might be why someone has a hard time addressing conflict, because of their personal experiences, because they weren't taught or trained on how to address conflict in a professional manner or in a healthy manner, right? So switching that mind shift can be very beneficial when addressing conflict. And again, it's inevitable. It's going to come up at work. Research shows that managers specifically engage in conflict about 6 hours per week. So that can be from anything minor to something more escalated. And then some types of conflict at work can be just in regards to the tasks that we're given to do. Maybe we think we've been given too many tasks. Maybe the way we do a task is different than the way our manager does a task, and that can create conflict. One department might have some resources in order to finish a project, and another department doesn't. Our different styles of work. Sometimes people like to procrastinate, and they think they do their best work by procrastinating and meeting a tight deadline. Others of us need a lot more time in order to process things. Obviously, we all have different personalities and come from those different backgrounds that might contribute to some potential conflicts as well. The barriers that we already addressed. And then cultural differences, and that can be cultural in terms of globally, but it also can be just coming from different industries and different work environments can potentially lead to conflict. So again, if we change our mindset, there are benefits to being able to engage in conflict in a healthy manner, to create that safe space and safe environment to say, hey, it's okay to have disagreements, and be able to share our different perspectives and different viewpoints. It can promote growth in terms of the company and organization. Hearing from people who have different ideas, different opinions, different ways to express them, that can promote creativity and innovation when we allow that to happen. I always say when you have really boring meetings, that might be a red flag as well, because you might be inhibiting people to engage in conflict in a healthy manner so that we can resolve issues and we can get to new opportunities and new ways of doing things as well. It's always going to be good for your own professional development and personal development if you're able to address conflict personally in your own homes and also professionally at work. It also promotes a mutual understanding of different beliefs and different cultures. Really having that open mind and being able to experience that other person's perspective and point of view ultimately can promote social change and progress. And we are in a constant flux of change. Our workforce is transitioning right now. And so we are learning new ways to do things with technology and within our workforces. And it can promote originality and reflection when our viewpoint is challenged. Are we taking it personally? Are we able to see and respect that someone has a different viewpoint from us? And we're all familiar with the costs of conflict when it isn't addressed in a healthy way. It can create higher stress among parties because when we do avoid conflict or isn't being handled well, or it's being brushed under the rug, we've probably all been there where it tends to fester and bubble, and it usually escalates into something worse. And a lot of times, employers and managers end up calling CEA and asking for help. It can result in lower productivity. People aren't doing their best work when there's that ongoing tension. People are walking on eggshells. People don't want to collaborate as well. There's lower cohesion when there's conflict going on that isn't being resolved. Or maybe we're just going around and round in circles in terms of the time spent in trying to resolve an issue. Maybe our emotions are getting the best of us, and so some bad decisions are made. And then ultimately it could lead to some mediation, arbitration, or of course, potential legal costs. And none of us want that. So what happens when we don't handle conflict well in the moment? Our fight or flight gets ignited. We all have it. We react emotionally, right? Because our human nature, our brain is triggered to determine whether this is safe or whether we need to fight or whether we need to flee. So we might avoid the conflict or we might react emotionally. And that can result in damaging relationships if we say some things that we don't mean. It catches us off guard in the moment. So we don't have time to think it through and we might say or do the wrong thing. And then ultimately the issue gets worse, right? If we haven't handled it well and nothing is getting resolved. So a few tips that we can think about. Again, it all starts with us and being self-aware. So this is from a book called Crucial Conversations. And one of the things you can do before you're going to have that difficult conversation or address a conflict that's going on is asking yourself these 4 questions. What do I really want for myself? When I engage in conversation with this person, this individual, what do I really want for myself? And what do I want for the other person, right? So it can be trying to get to that mutual purpose. Do I want to have a better working relationship with that person? Do I want to be able to understand a project that we're working on together? Do I want to be able to just establish some boundaries and respectful ways of communicating with each other? So what do I want for myself? What do I want for the other person or persons? What do I really want for the relationship? Is this person or person somebody I'm working with on a daily basis? Are they part of my team? Or maybe it's just a random issue and maybe I really don't need to address it right now. And then if I am going to address it, how would I behave if I really wanted these positive results? So I'm going to think about the tone I'm going to use. I'm going to think about the words I'm going to use in order to create that safe environment for the other person so that they can express themselves and their point of view. And sometimes we have what are called unhealthy goals and healthy goals. So again, thinking, are my goals healthy or are they unhealthy? Am I trying to just be right in this situation? Am I trying to look good in front of others? Am I trying to keep the peace, which sounds really good? But again, in a way, it's really brushing things under the rug and we're really not getting to the root of the issue or the problem. Am I trying to win? Or am I trying to blame someone else? Or am I just avoiding it altogether, which is sending a message to my team members, or if I'm a manager, it's sending a message to my employees that maybe things aren't going to be addressed well when they come up. So if we can really change that mindset and say, what are the healthy goals that I want the outcome to be? What can I learn from this conversation? How can I get to the truth? What results can we produce together? And I do really want to strengthen the relationship with this other person or persons. So finding that mutual purpose is really key. And sharing during that conversation that you care about the other person's goals, interests, and values, and you really believe that they care about yours. Again, if it's just as simple as I just want to be able to communicate with you, and know that you hope that they really care about that as well, then that's going to be that mutual purpose that keeps you going and keeps that dialogue, that two-way conversation going. If we're only having a one-way dialogue, it's not going to be effective, right? So we want to create that opportunity for a two-way dialogue, really acknowledging everybody's feelings in the situation, sharing the facts that we know, and allowing that other person to share their perspective so that we can get to that mutual place of what do we do going from here. Some additional tips for facilitating crucial conversations, and I know it can be really challenging, is keeping the language simple, clear, direct, and neutral. Obviously, we don't want to get our emotions to get the best of us. So really being aware of what triggers us and being in the right mindset to have that conversation. If we are feeling overly emotional or we are going to react rather than respond neutral, then maybe we have that conversation another day. Obviously, we don't want to name call or finger point, and then avoid sentences that start with you because that can seem very assertive and as if we're attacking the other person. We want to use things like I believe or I think that. that just kind of softens the conversation. And then you don't have to apologize for having a conversation, because sometimes when we apologize, that makes the other person feel like they have to take care of the situation with you. And it's about having that two-way dialogue. Also, this is a huge habit that we all have in terms of using the word but, and using the word and, even if we're writing an email, it can again soften that conversation and not put someone on the defense. When we use but, or even the nicer version of however, sometimes that can put someone on the defensive or make them hesitant to really share their ideas. It really signals combativeness rather than collaboration. So using yes and can help engage, again, continue to extend that two-way dialogue and not cut someone off from sharing, going further in the conversation. And then when in doubt, just take a look at the list before you have that difficult conversation, but also keep in mind, again, what is your mindset, so that you are able to create that safe space for the other person to provide their perspective and their thoughts. So final moments, how to be a more confident communicator, as much as you can, especially depending on the topic and the seriousness, the sensitivity. Try to prepare in advance what you're going to say, especially when you're having that difficult conversation. Know your audience. Ask people how they prefer to be communicated with. Edit your communications, especially in email, and really practice what you're going to say. Then it will start becoming natural. Learn from others, who in your organization, who in your team seems to be a confident, effective communicator, and ask them for tips. Listening more and speaking less, especially if you're in a position of management and leadership, that's where you're really getting the critical information that you need to be an effective leader, is listening to your team and what they have to say. And then if you're like me, master your body language. I know sometimes my facial expressions reveal so much more than what I'm saying. So being conscious to make sure that they're in alignment with each other. And then giving you some homework so that you can take it and think about it. Take action in being more clear and concise with your communication. Start really looking at your emails, how you're communicating with people. Can you be more clear? Can you be more concise? Get to the heart of the matter, and then think of a conflict. Is there one right now that you need to address, and how can you prepare for that conversation? It's an ongoing skill that we can always continue to improve and elevate. And again, as Warren Buffett said, it can increase your value up to 50%. So we're all in this together. And I'm throwing it over to Anna to take us home.
I will take us home so happily, Keisha. Man, I love this training so much. I pretty much love all the trainings that you do. You're such a wonderful presenter. And you're just so calming and inspiring. I do want to draw your attention to both the chat and the screen. So if you are joining us for continuing education credits, obviously on the screen, but I also put it in the chat if that's more your style. HRCI code 659932, SHRM code 24-9X7T. If you have any issues redeeming those, by any means, please email us ceainfo@employers.org. We'll make sure that you get credit for today's training. Again, in the chat box, I did put a link to the rest of our trainings. We do have some complimentary ones coming up. We have a free resources overview coming up on June 6th. And if you enjoyed Keisha's training today, we have a 6-week it's a leadership training master course, basically, with our amazing Keisha Hansen. I highly recommend it. It starts tomorrow. So if you want to do a deep dive into being a better leader, whether you are new or experienced, there's always some great stuff to learn. So highly encourage looking at that. And of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, we do have a survey. I promise it's not scary. It's 5 questions and it should take you about a minute to complete. But the feedback that you share really does help us here at CEA to continue to develop and improve our trainings. So we would appreciate that. So with that, thank you all for joining us live. And we hope to see you on a training soon. And thank you, Keisha, again, for sharing all of your expertise with us. Cheers.